Hello and welcome to this audio space. This is not an audiobook about sports, tools, or corporate advice. This is a journey into the silent, invisible emotional labor of fatherhood. Over the next hour, we will step entirely behind the stoic armor to translate what society so easily misinterprets as coldness or distance, but what is actually a father's deep, quiet, and covert love. You will hear the raw, unspoken thoughts that fathers carry across 6 major life chapters, from the terrifying awe of a newborn baby to the quiet grief of an empty nest. This text is designed to act as an emotional mirror, shifting your perspective on the man who built the architecture of your life. Whether your relationship with your father is close, distant, complicated, or lingering in memory, this audio sanctuary is an invitation to understand him fully. Introduction. There is a particular kind of love that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a grand speech, a decorative ribbon, or a dramatic hand pressed to the chest. It arrives instead in the way a man wakes up before the alarm, not because he has to, but because something animal and ancient in him wants to be awake first, to confirm that the house is still breathing, and that the darkness outside has not crept into the sanctuary. It arrives in the way he drives the same road home every evening and never, not once, tells anyone about the quiet and private terror of not being enough. We live in a culture that celebrates expressive love, the notes left on pillows, the tears wept openly, the verbal declarations. These forms of love are highly legible and translate easily into movies and poetry. But there is another kind of love, covert love, that does not speak the same dialect. Covert love is the love that acts rather than declares. It is the love that builds a bookshelf at midnight because you mentioned, offhandedly, that you were running out of space. It is the love that drives 4 hours in a storm to pick you up from a place it never asked how you ended up at. For men who grew up in a world that taught them that their value was tied entirely to what they could provide, protect, and fix, silence became a shield. They were taught early and firmly that their job was to do, not to feel. This audiobook is an act of translation. It is an instruction manual for the adult child to look across the room or across the years and finally see the full human being standing in the architecture of your life. He built you a house. It is time to see how much the blueprints cost him. Chapter 1. The Midnight Check. Part 1. The Unsent Letter, the Father's Perspective. I didn't know it would feel like this. No one told me, and to be honest, I don't think anyone could have found the right words to warn me. You are exactly 4 weeks old today. Right now, you are fast asleep in the crib in the next room, wrapped tightly in that yellow blanket. The house is completely quiet, save for the rhythmic humming of the refrigerator down the hall, but I am standing here in the dark hallway, frozen. My right hand is pressed firmly against the white wooden door frame of your room, and I have been standing here for 10 minutes just trying to stop myself from turning the handle and creeping back inside. I went in 20 minutes ago. I went in an hour before that. Every single time, I find some absurd, manufactured reason to cross the threshold. I tell myself the room might be too cold, or that the blanket might have slipped over your face, or that I heard a phantom cough through the monitor. But those are all lies I tell myself. The truth is, I just need to stand over the rails of that crib, holding my own breath until I hear the faint, soft whistle of yours. I need to verify that this fragile, incredible thing in front of me is still breathing. I look at your tiny hands, curled into loose fists against your cheeks, and an overwhelming, paralyzing weight settles right into the center of my chest. It is an animal instinct, something ancient and heavy, reminding me that your entire survival depends on a man who is still trying to figure out how to be a man himself. Until 4 weeks ago, my life was simple. If I failed, I only failed myself. But now, the architecture of my entire world has shifted. You have made me vulnerable in a way I never gave anyone permission to do. And here is what I am truly afraid of, the thought that keeps me awake long after my body is begging for sleep. I am terrified of the version of you that exists 20 or 30 years from now. I imagine you sitting across a table from someone you love, looking back at these years, and not finding me there in your memories. I am afraid you will grow up and tell someone, someday, that your father was fine, that he was a good provider, technically, that he worked long hours, kept the mortgage paid, and made sure the lights stayed on, but that he was just a quiet, contained, and distant ghost in the background of your childhood. I need to tell you right now, while you are too small to understand, that my quiet is not distance. It has never been distance. Every single time I feel an emotion so large it frightens me, I don't know how to say it aloud. The words get stuck in my throat. But that love doesn't just evaporate because I fail to speak it. It accumulates inside me. It builds up under pressure. It finds the form of this white wooden door frame I am gripping in the dark hallway. It finds the form of the extra blanket I tucked around your feet an hour ago, for absolutely no rational reason other than my desperate need to connect with you. I love you with a ferocity that feels like concrete in my lungs, in ways I simply do not have the vocabulary or the architecture to express. I am going to get this parenting journey wrong more times than I get it right. I am going to revert, whenever the pressure gets too high, to the only language I was ever handed by the men who came before me, the language of doing and protecting rather than saying. But I need it written into the fabric of the universe that on this quiet night, while the world was sleeping, your father was standing here in the dark hallway, completely overflowing with love for you. Sleep safely, little one. I am on the clock, and I will be right here when you wake up. Part 2, the translation narrative, what we saw vs what he felt. To truly understand the silent blueprint of a father, we have to look directly into the gap, the immense, unspoken space between what we observed as children and what he was actually navigating beneath his stoic surface. When we were young, we saw a man who moved through the house in the exact same order every single night before he allowed himself to sleep. We heard his heavy footsteps on the floorboards, the metallic click of the front door lock being checked for a second time, the rattle of the window frames, the turning of the deadbolt. To a child, this just looked like an annoying habit, a repetitive routine, or a minor obsession. But this was not a habit. This was his liturgy. This was his private, silent prayer. In a world where he couldn't control the economy, the future, or the hardships waiting for his children outside the front door, those physical locks were something he could command. Each turned key was a sentence in a love letter he never had the courage to read aloud to you. I am keeping the storm outside, and I will not let anything enter this perimeter that means you harm. We remember milestones, the day we were born, or the day we achieved something monumental. We saw a father who stood calmly in the background, who didn't cry openly like everyone else, or who contained his tears so quickly that his face looked like a mask of iron. We might have interpreted that as coldness or a lack of deep investment. What we didn't know, and what he would never tell us, was that the emotional containment took every single ounce of his strength. He didn't avoid crying because he cared less. He avoided crying because he believed his primary duty was to be an unshakable foundation. He was the man who walked into the hospital bathroom, locked the door, wept privately into a paper towel for 3 minutes until his chest stopped shaking, washed his face with freezing water, and returned to the room to hold us with steadier hands than he felt he actually deserved. We saw a man who came into our bedroom when we were burning up with a childhood fever. He didn't offer long words of comfort or rock us back to sleep with gentle songs. He simply walked in, pressed the cold back of his rough hand against our forehead, adjusted the pillow, and left the room without a sound. To a sick child, that silence can feel lonely. But beneath his surface, his mind was operating like a frantic, terrified processing engine. He lay awake for hours in his own bed afterward, staring at the ceiling, calculating the interval between doses of medicine, agonizing over whether he should wake up the doctor, and slipping back into our room at 2 in the morning to check our breathing without waking a single soul. His love was not absent because it was quiet. It was simply fully channeled into vigilance. Part 3, the guided reflection. Let us pause the narrative here and let the weight of these translations settle into the room. If you are walking or sitting quietly in a comfortable chair, allow your mind to drift back through the decades, past the arguments and the modern complexities, all the way into the landscape of your ordinary childhood. Isolate one specific, mundane memory. Picture an ordinary afternoon where your father was present in the same room as you, but said absolutely nothing. Perhaps he was driving the car while you stared out the passenger window, or perhaps he was sitting in his favorite chair on a Sunday morning before the rest of the house had fully stirred. Recall the atmosphere of that room. Now, ask yourself this honest question. In that specific moment of heavy silence, what were you certain his silence meant? Did you interpret it as boredom? Did you read it as disapproval or an emotional distance that you felt you had to earn your way across? Now, take a deep breath and look at that exact same memory through the lens of covert love. Knowing the invisible architecture of a father's mind, what else might that silence have meant? Is it possible that the man sitting in that chair was not withdrawing from you, but was instead using every ounce of his energy to swallow his own exhaustion, his own professional worries, and his own fears, just to ensure that his stress never leaked into your afternoon? Is it possible that his quiet presence was his way of providing a safe, unburdened gravity for you to just exist? Sit with the immense gap between your first interpretation and your second. What we so easily labeled as indifference when we were young may have been a good man at the absolute, desperate limit of his emotional vocabulary. Chapter 2. The Language of Iron. Part 1. The Unsent Letter, the Father's Perspective. You asked me once why I fixed things instead of talking about them. You were about 14 years old at the time, and there was a heavy, dense, completely unspoken argument lingering in the air of our home. You had stormed out of the living room, slammed a door, and sought refuge somewhere else. But a few minutes later, your restlessness brought you into the kitchen, and you found me sitting alone at the table. I was completely taken up with fixing a broken cabinet drawer, adjusting its tiny screws, and working with a level of concentration that was entirely manufactured. I didn't actually need to fix that drawer right then, at 10 o'clock at night, but I desperately needed an anchor. My hands needed something to hold because my mind was spinning out of control. You stood quietly in the kitchen doorway, watched the rhythmic movement of my hands for a few long, agonizing moments, and then you asked me a question that cut right through my armor. You looked at me and said, "Why do you always do that? Why do you fix something mechanical whenever there is an emotional problem in this house?" I didn't have an answer that I could offer you that night. My tongue felt completely heavy, and the words simply wouldn't arrange themselves into anything that made sense to a 14-year-old child. I think I just muttered something about things needing to work, turned my back, and went right back to my tools. But here is the raw, unedited answer I have owed you for all these years. When I was growing up, love was never treated as an internal feeling that you described with poetry, or long conversations, or emotional vulnerability. Love was treated entirely as a practical result that you produced through sweat and labor. Love was measured by a working boiler in the basement during a brutal winter storm. It was proved by a car engine that started reliably in the dead of a freezing morning because it had been properly maintained. In the world I was raised in, the absolute quality of a man's love could be read, directly, in the structural condition of the physical things he took care of. So when the atmosphere in our home was emotionally charged, and I found myself completely paralyzed by my own private terror of saying the wrong thing, or making the argument worse, I went to work on the physical objects I could control. I didn't know how to mend your hurt feelings or fix the emotional rift between us in that moment, but I could make sure that the kitchen drawer glided smoothly on its tracks. It was a silent, desperate declaration that said, "I am still here. I am attending to this house, I am attending to your environment, and I am not going anywhere." For men like me, the physical act of attending is the feeling. The two are completely inseparable. Years later, when I spent 3 hours changing the oil in your car, or when I oiled the rusted hinge on your bedroom door so it stopped squeaking, I wasn't just doing standard home maintenance. I was saying, your safety matters to me, and your privacy matters to me. I mistakenly believed the house itself was speaking for me, that the running water and the sturdy walls were carrying my voice. I am sorry. I should have had the courage to say it directly with my mouth. Part 2. The Translation Narrative, what we saw vis what he felt. As children navigating the intense, confusing landscape of our youth, we often saw a father who responded to our deepest emotional distress by offering cold, logical, and frustrating solutions. When we came home crying because a close friend had betrayed us, or because we felt completely excluded at school, or because our dreams had been shattered, he didn't open his arms to offer a soft embrace. He didn't sit down to validate our pain or tell us that our feelings were justified. Instead, he pulled out a yellow legal pad, or he handed us a practical tool, or he immediately began mapping out a rigid, multi-step strategy to solve the issue. In those vulnerable moments, we felt completely unheard. We felt deeply dismissed, cold, or managed like a difficult project rather than a child who simply needed comfort and emotional shelter. But if we pull back the curtain on his stoic exterior, his internal reality was an absolute, panicked scramble. To a father raised entirely in the architecture of covert love, encountering an emotional problem without an immediate, actionable solution feels exactly like standing inside a house on fire with no water in sight. He does not hold back comfort because he is unfeeling or detached. He holds it back because he experiences your emotional pain as a direct crisis that he is personally, uniquely responsible for fixing. Offering a logical solution is his clumsy, frantic way of trying to stop your suffering as quickly as possible. While we thought he was being clinical, calculating, and distant, he was actually spending hours staying up late into the night, silently worrying in the dark, and researching the exact mechanics of your problem. He did this because he simply could not bear the agonizing weight of watching you navigate a harsh world that he couldn't personally smooth out for you. His logic was not a lack of empathy. It was the only form of empathy he knew how to weaponize against your pain. Part 3. The Guided Reflection. Let us pull back from the noise and the distractions of the day once more. Close your eyes if you are in a safe space to do so, breathe deeply, and let your memories wander back into the past, all the way to a time when you brought a heavy, burning emotional problem to your father, only to be met with a cold wall of facts, logic, or strategy. Allow yourself to feel a shadow of that original frustration again, the distinct sense of standing before a pragmatic judge when you simply wanted a warm sanctuary. Now change the lighting on that memory entirely. Look closely at the tired eyes and the rough, weathered hands of the man offering those facts. If those logical solutions were never an attempt to push your emotions away, but were actually the only raw tools he possessed to shield you from a dangerous world, how does the memory begin to shift? Can you see that the strategic plan he drew up on that paper was actually his version of a shield, hammered out in a language made entirely of iron, because he was never taught the language of silk? What was the actual, protective asset he was trying to build for you in that moment to keep your life from tilting off its axis? Consider the possibility that his logic was the highest form of poetry he could compose. Chapter 3. The Ghost at the Kitchen Table. Part 1. The Unsent Letter, the Father's Perspective. I know you think I am completely checked out when I sit here at the kitchen table after a long shift, staring right through the wall. I can feel your eyes on me from the shadows of the hallway, and I know exactly what I look like to you in those heavy evening hours. I look like a ghost who brought nothing but exhaustion, fatigue, and a cold, unapproachable shadow into the warmth of the room. You pass by the kitchen quietly on your tiptoes, speaking to your mother in hushed whispers because I seem completely locked inside a brick wall of my own making. What I cannot find the strength to tell you in those moments, what my heavy tongue simply cannot form, is that my silence is the only filter I have left to preserve the peace of this family. The world outside our front door is incredibly loud, deeply demanding, and utterly indifferent to whether I break or hold under the massive pressure of my responsibilities. Every single hour I trade out there, dealing with difficult supervisors, handling demanding clients, swallowing my pride, and tolerating the constant, quiet panic of economic survival, is an hour I spend keeping the harshness of that world from touching your life. I absorb the friction of the marketplace all day so that you can remain soft, unburdened, and safe. If I speak when I am this empty, the internal pressure will leak out, and I might say something sharp, impatient, or accidentally angry that chips away at your sense of security. I am sitting here, refusing to move or speak, because I am actively holding the perimeter of our home. I am swallowing the exhaustion, the performance anxiety, and the financial stress so that when you look at me, you only see a floor that doesn't shake, a roof that doesn't leak, and a baseline that remains entirely steady. My silence is not a withdrawal from you. It is the physical, grueling act of containing the storm outside so it never breaches your sanctuary. Part 2. The Translation Narrative, what we saw vs what he felt. Growing up, many of us carry a vivid memory of a father who was emotionally unavailable or entirely distant after a long workday. We saw him walk through the front door, barely make eye contact, drop his keys on the counter, and immediately isolate himself behind a newspaper, a television screen, or a completely blank stare into space. If we tried to show him a drawing we made, tell him a story about our day, or ask for his precious attention, we were often met with short, one-word answers or a heavy, deflating sigh of fatigue. As children, we frequently interpreted this heavy atmosphere as a sign that we were an inconvenience, an annoyance, or a burden to his rest. We grew up believing that his work and his stress mattered far more to him than our presence. But if we translate that silence through the architecture of covert love, the reality tells a heartbreakingly beautiful story. That post-work silence was not a rejection of his children. It was a grueling, necessary decompression protocol. He was operating as an emotional shock absorber for the entire household. He understood, in his own wordless way, that the anger of a toxic workplace, the fear of layoffs, and the sheer panic of mounting bills could destroy the emotional climate of a home if it crossed the threshold. So he used his own body and mind as a filter. He sat in that heavy silence to let the toxic dust settle inside his own chest first, deliberately sacrificing his immediate connection with his children to buy them an unburdened childhood. His emotional absence in those hours was the expensive price he paid to preserve your emotional freedom. Part 3. The Guided Reflection. Let us pause our narrative once more and allow the gravity of this realization to breathe in the room. If you can, travel back in time to the working years of your father's life. Visualize him walking through the front door after a brutal day of labor, whether he wore a corporate tie or a blue-collar uniform. Recall the physical toll on his shoulders, the deep exhaustion etched into his face, and the quiet shadow he brought to the dinner table. Now ask yourself with fresh eyes, what was the true nature of the weight he was carrying outside the house that he never explicitly spoke about? When he sat in that thick, unapproachable post-work silence, what specific anxieties, economic pressures, or professional humiliations was he actively swallowing just to make sure you never had to carry them yourself? Recognize that his distance was actually a shield, held firmly in place until his hands were too tired to drop it. Chapter 4. The Half-Second Pause. Part 1. The Unsent Letter, the Father's Perspective. We yelled today. We had that massive, explosive clash of wills right there in the narrow hallway, and you slammed your bedroom door with a sudden, violent force that literally shook the pictures hanging on the walls of this house. After the wood clicked shut, I found myself standing on the other side of it in the absolute silence of the corridor, my fist tightly raised, frozen midair. Every raw instinct in my body wanted to knock that door down, or push it open, or shout back through the frame with the full, unbridled weight of my authority as your parent. I wanted to react. I wanted to defend myself, to demand the basic respect I felt I had rightfully earned over a decade of continuous labor, sacrifice, and silent worry. But I didn't. I just stood there for what felt like an eternity, breathing in the quiet, and then I slowly let my hand drop back to my side. I turned around, and I walked down the stairs in complete, heavy silence. I know exactly what you think that walk down the stairs meant. I know you interpreted my silence as cold indifference, a sign that I simply didn't care enough about you to stay and fight for our relationship, or that your words didn't matter to me. You probably thought my turning away was a calculated punishment, a display of emotional rejection. But what you could not see through the thick wood of that closed door, and what I lacked the vocabulary to explain to you, was the agonizing, heavy reality of that half-second pause. In that single fraction of a moment, I had to make a choice. I had to choose between being right and being your father. I wanted so badly to explain my side, to tell you how incredibly terrifying it is to watch you grow up, how paralyzing it is to realize the world is getting bigger and more dangerous for you, and how much sleep I lose wondering if the choices I am making are failing you. But as I looked at the grain of the wood on your door, a sudden realization hit me. You are testing the boundaries of this life right now. You are leaning your full weight against the walls of this house to see if they will hold steady when your own internal world gets shaky and confused. You don't need an echo of your own anger. You need a wall that refuses to crack. If I hit back, if I match your adolescent fire with my own adult rage, the whole architecture of your security collapses underneath us. So I take the slam. I take your rage, and I stand in the hallway letting myself be the shock absorber. I swallow my pride in that half-second pause so that you have a completely steady foundation to push against while you figure out who you are. Part 2. The translation narrative, what we saw vs what he felt. During our teenage and young adult years, our memories of our fathers are often dominated by rigid boundaries, uncompromising curfews, or a sudden, frustratingly cold withdrawal from arguments. To our young eyes, we saw an oppressor, a tyrant, or an emotionally detached warden who cared far more about rules, compliance, and maintaining absolute control than he did about our personal freedom or happiness. When we pushed for our independence, his answers were rarely accompanied by explanations or emotional validation. They were short, final, and empty. Because I said so. Or, as long as you live under this roof, you follow my rules. But if we translate that rigidity through the language of covert love, we uncover a man locked inside an intense, desperate fear of losing you to a world he knows can be deeply unforgiving. A father watching his teenager step out into the world sees every sharp edge, every hidden pitfall, and every irreversible mistake waiting in the shadows. Because he was never taught how to express that panic through vulnerable words. Because saying, "I am terrified that you will get hurt," felt too fragile for a protector. He translated his fear into strict curfews and uncompromising boundaries. His rigidness was a frantic attempt to build a physical guardrail around your life. Furthermore, his sudden withdrawal from volatile arguments wasn't coldness. It was an extraordinary exercise in emotional discipline. He walked away down those stairs because he knew that if he let his own emotions override his discipline, he might say something in anger that would break the relationship permanently. He chose to let you hate his rules rather than let his own tongue damage your bond. Part 3. The guided reflection. Let the echo of those old arguments fade away as we look back into the landscape of your youth. Think of one specific conflict, one explosive argument, or one rigid boundary dispute you had with your father during your teenage or young adult years. Recall the intense resentment you felt in that moment, the burning desire for independence, and the absolute certainty that he was simply trying to control your life. Now rewrite that memory with the blueprint of covert love in your hands. If his rules, his curfews, and his uncompromising boundaries weren't about control at all, but were actually the clumsy, panicked movements of a man terrified for your safety, how does the memory change? What was the hidden danger, the sharp edge of the world, that he was desperately trying to shield you from? Take a moment to see the immense love hiding directly behind the boundary. Chapter 5. The Unshaken Pillar. Part 1. The Unsent Letter, the Father's Perspective. When the bad news came, when the family crisis hit our home and the room completely broke down into tears and chaos, I was the only person who didn't cry. I sat there at the very edge of the couch, completely organized, calm, and hyper-focused on the immediate logistics. I began making lists, organizing legal documents, and figuring out schedules. I saw you look at me from across the room with that cold, painful question in your eyes, wondering how your father could be so detached, so clinical, and so utterly unfeeling when our entire world was tearing apart at the seams. You thought my dryness was indifference. You thought I didn't care. I need you to understand the profound, devastating loneliness of being the pillar. I wanted to break down with you. My chest felt like solid concrete, and the air in that room was too thick to pull into my lungs. But I looked around that room and saw that everyone else had completely abandoned the architecture of logistics to surrender to their grief. And someone had to hold the walls up. Someone had to make the phone calls to doctors, hospitals, and funeral homes. Someone had to sign the papers, deal with the insurance, and ensure that the basic machinery of our daily lives didn't grind to a halt. Someone had to make sure there was food on the kitchen table for people who were too broken to remember to eat. I delayed my own tears. I locked my own sorrow in a dark room inside my mind, because I knew that if the pillar shakes, the roof collapses on the very people who are breaking down safely underneath it. I held the weight of the roof so you could weep with complete freedom. I didn't skip the grief, I just postponed it. I finally cried alone in the car on the way to the all-night pharmacy at midnight, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. That is where my sorrow lives. Part 2. The translation narrative, what we saw vs what he felt. We often carry memories of our fathers as cold, detached, or strangely robotic during moments of immense family tragedy, sudden illness, or profound loss. While mothers and siblings are embracing, weeping, and comforting one another, the father is often found standing slightly apart, fixing a broken latch on a suitcase, organizing a parking schedule, or quietly making coffee in the kitchen. As children and young adults, we often felt judged or alienated by this apparent lack of grief. We wondered how a human being could remain so dry-eyed in the presence of heartbreak. But if we look beneath that steady surface, his behavior was a deliberate act of profound self-sacrifice. He understood that a family in the middle of a catastrophic storm needs an anchor, not a second wave. He took his own immediate trauma and compartmentalized it, locking it away behind steel doors so he could execute the brutal duties required to keep the family safe and moving forward. He took on the invisible burden of stability. While the family experienced the luxury of expressing their sorrow collectively, the father bore his sorrow in total, agonizing isolation, ensuring that the structural integrity of the home remained intact while the storm passed over. Part 3. The guided reflection. Breathe into the space of that quiet strength. Think back to a major crisis, a sudden loss, or a time of profound grief that your family experienced in the past. Locate your father in that memory. Where was he standing while everyone else was crying? What practical, mundane tasks was he quietly executing in the background? Now realize the immense energy it took to keep his face calm while his heart was breaking. Can you see those practical tasks, the phone calls, the driving, the logistics, as his silent way of carrying the sorrow? Ask yourself this critical question. Who would have had to carry those heavy, structural tasks if he had broken down with the rest of the room? Recognize that his dry eyes were the ultimate gift of protection, buying you the safety to fall apart. Chapter 6. The Bittersweet Horizon. Part 1. The Unsent Letter, the Father's Perspective. The moving truck is fully packed, and all your boxes are safely tucked inside. You are standing there in the driveway of your new life, looking at me, waiting for the big, cinematic speech, the profound advice, or the tearful, sweeping embrace that signifies a beautiful departure. And all I did was shake your hand firmly, give you a brief, tight hug, and tell you to make sure you check the oil in your car before any long trip. I am driving home alone now in the quiet evening, and the silence in this car is absolute. The house is going to be far too big tonight, and your empty room is going to look like an echo chamber. I didn't give you the grand, emotional speech because my throat was too tight to let the words pass through without my voice completely breaking in front of you. I couldn't afford to let you see me shatter. I told you to check the oil because that mundane, practical instruction is the only way my hands and my tongue know how to say, I love you, your safety is my highest priority, and please remember that you can always come back home if the world treats you poorly. My job as your daily architect is officially over. You have built your own walls now, and you don't need my perimeter to keep you safe anymore. I am stepping back into the shadow of the house I spent decades building for you, watching you drive away, and praying with every fiber of my soul that the invisible foundation I laid holds you steady out there in the world. Part 2. The translation narrative, what we saw vs what he felt. We all carry memories of milestones, graduations, weddings, moving days, or departures for college, where our fathers seemed strangely brief, businesslike, or hurried during the final goodbye. We expected a moment of deep validation or a confession of love, but instead, we were met with a firm handshake, a quick pat on the back, and a reminder about car maintenance or finances. It can leave a lingering sense of rejection, a feeling that our departure was just another item on his checklist to clear. But the internal reality of a father at a major life milestone is a man experiencing a profound, bittersweet grief. His entire identity for decades was anchored to one single purpose, being your daily protector and provider. A goodbye means surrendering that sacred role. It means accepting that his shield is no longer required. His briefness during the departure is not a lack of emotion. It is a desperate, monumental effort to avoid breaking down in front of you. He deliberately holds back his own tears because he wants your departure to be entirely about your joy, your excitement, and your future, rather than being weighed down by his sorrow and his empty nest. His quick goodbye is the final, selfless act of an architect stepping out of the frame so you can enjoy the view. Part 3. The guided reflection. Let your mind rest on that driveway, that airport gate, or that wedding floor once again. Reflect on a major transition or departure in your adult life. How did your father act during those final few minutes before you left his daily circle? Now that you understand the immense pressure behind his brief handshake, the tight throat behind his simple instructions, what was the magnificent speech he was actually trying to give you through his actions? Can you hear that his reminder to check the oil or the tires was actually a profound declaration of eternal devotion? See him standing in the driveway, watching your taillights fade, still protecting you with his thoughts as you disappear over the horizon. Final thoughts to the builders of quiet sanctuaries. This is our letter back to you. Dad, we see the things you never said. We see the version of you that existed long before you were our father, the young boy who was figuring out the world entirely alone, choosing love, duty, and protection even when his own templates were inadequate, and the culture offered no vocabulary for his interior life. We see the version of you that stood in the hallway in the dark when we were small, simply needing to be near the fact of our existence. We see you in the conflict years, trying in that frantic, half-second pause to choose a door over a wall. We know you didn't always choose correctly, but we understand now what was happening in the silence, the immense love looking for a way through the stone. We know the margins of our lives held because of your strength. We know you were deeply afraid sometimes, and that keeping a calm, unshakable face took an immense, invisible effort. We are taking you with us into our future, not as a weight or a shadow, but as an unshakable foundation. We recognize the language of iron, the midnight checks, and the lonely pillars for what they always were, a magnificent, lifelong shelter. Everything you built is in us, and it is good. Thank you for being the architect of the house. The epilogue of understanding. For decades, we lived in a house without reading the blueprints. We enjoyed the warmth of the rooms, the security of the roof, and the stability of the foundation without ever stopping to calculate what those structures cost the man who stayed up late to build them. We mistook his silence for absence, his logic for coldness, and his rigid boundaries for control. We expected him to speak a language he was never taught, judging him against templates of emotional expression that his world never provided. But true maturity is the willingness to look back across the years with a softer, wider lens. It is the realization that love does not always wear a crown of words. More often, it wears the calluses of labor, the exhaustion of provision, and the quiet vigilance of protection. When we look at our fathers now, we no longer see an unshakable myth or a distant stranger. We see a whole human being, complex, deeply feeling, and fiercely committed to a quiet devotion that required him to swallow his own fears so that we could discover our own courage. The conversation this audiobook begins is much bigger than any single family. It is an open door, an invitation to step across the threshold of old resentments, let go of the expectations of what he should have said, and finally honor the magnificent architecture of what he actually did. The final guided reflection. As our journey together draws to a close, let the final silence of this audio track serve as a sanctuary for your own thoughts. If your father is still with you, picture his face as it looks today, the lines etched by time, the hands that have carried the weight of your world. If he lives only in your memory, hold that memory steady in the light. Breathe deeply, and let these 3 final questions settle into your heart. 1. Now that you have walked behind his stoic armor, what is the single biggest misconception you carried about his silence during your childhood? 2. If you could strip away the old arguments and the historical complexities, what is the one specific act of covert love, the filled gas tank, the checked lock, the quiet sacrifice, that you now realize was his most profound masterpiece of devotion? 3. What is the sentence you need to say to him, or to his memory, to let him know that you have finally read the blueprints, and that you see the love built into every single room. Take all the time you need with these answers. The house is still standing, and it was built exceedingly well. Thank you for listening.